So our scripture this morning is from Luke, chapter 18, verse 41. It's just one sentence, but it's very powerful. Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" The man replied, "Lord, I want to see." Unfortunately, when we're sick or in pain, the first thing that happens when we go to the doctor and check in is we have to answer a ton of questions. You have to fill out those forms, right? Somebody just said, "Oh, that's so much fun," but I think you're being sarcastic. They always give the clipboard, and it's got 2 pages of questions on it, front and back, and then there's another page, front and back, and it feels like it's an unending form. It can be a little bit upsetting, and then once the doctor comes into the exam room, you have to go through the whole thing all over again. The nurses ask you questions, and then the doctors ask you questions, and it's like, seriously, they should know the answers. But then when we give our answers, they're typing away on their laptop. And then the doctor enters and says, "What's going on?" And it's like, "I just wrote all this out. And then I just told the nurse, and now you're asking me the same thing." And I want to say, can't you just read it? But I learned my lesson to not do that. So I just go ahead and answer nicely. And I'm sure my blood pressure is high because I'm just really frustrated about answering all these questions multiple times. But I've learned my lesson. I just go ahead and answer them. I fill out the forms. I talk to the nurse. I say the same thing to the doctor. Because I want both of them to attend to me, and I want them to be nice to me. I want them to get to the bottom of what's going on with me. So I'm just nice. They always ask your name, and about a million other things. You have to check off all these boxes. They ask how long you've had this pain, how severe it is. They want to make sure that they know what kind of medications you've been taking, including your vitamins and supplements. Did you know that? You need to tell the medical personnel any herbal supplements or any vitamins you're taking. Because sometimes medications and herbal supplements and vitamins can contraindicate each other. So you need to let them know everything you take. It's an endless explanation, and I don't like it. I really try to avoid it, but sometimes you really have to go to the doctor in order to get the diagnosis and find out what's the matter with you. And then you can get the appropriate treatment. And that's important. So I learned how to go to the doctor instead of avoiding doctor visits. Because sometimes these situations can be life or death, and you need to go. And also that testing is important to figure out if you've got something that's life-threatening or not. Y'all maybe remember that my mother died when she was 39 years old from a drug interaction. She went to the hospital in the middle of the night. The doctor gave her 7 different types of medications, 7 medications. And they determined that she had Crohn's disease, but they did not do any formal testing for that. They just thought that it was Crohn's, and so the doctor prescribed 7 different prescriptions. At that time, the hospital had a pharmacy, and you could just go and pick up the medications immediately. When I was with my parents to interpret, so we got the medicines, got home. My mom took the medication Friday morning, Friday evening, Saturday morning, Saturday evening, and then Sunday morning, she took the medication, and it killed her. She died in the bathroom before she could get ready for her day. Even though those questions are very irritating because they seem so very repetitive, it's important that we answer them all so that the person can take in what we're saying appropriate decision. Now, in my mother's case, they did not make an appropriate decision. They were rushing her through. She was a woman, and women tend to complain and just be crybabies. They just wanted to keep her quiet, so they wrote a prescription for 7 different types of medications. And several of these are not even used any longer. Because one of those medications were prescribed at a dose enough to kill a 500-pound man, and my mom was just a thin little woman. And if I was interpreting and my parents didn't understand, but they didn't ask me for clarification. So if you are not understanding what the interpreter's telling you from what the doctor's saying, then ask for repetition. Do not be afraid to say, I don't understand what you're saying, and why will this be good for me? Ask questions. Ask about the side effects. It's important in order for you to receive appropriate treatment. One of Jesus' names is healer. He was teacher and had all these different names. Well, one of his names was healer. He was often called the great physician. He's called that in the Bible, the great physician. And the gospel is replete of examples with him healing many different types of illnesses, disabilities. And his healings were known as miracles, but the word miracle, it can be translated as signs. So the word miracles actually means signs. So the healings were signs to show who God is, so that people would see this happen and then look to God. And know that the healing was coming from God. The signs were to show that God was here, to show the power of God, the compassion of God, the love of God. And one cool thing, that Jesus, our great physician, began his healing process by asking questions. Some of his questions sound like the same questions that doctors ask today. That's kind of cool. When Jesus first met the man who had the demon in him, Jesus started with questions. He asked, "What is your name?" is what Jesus asked. When the man came to Jesus about his son who was having seizures, Jesus asked the same question that our doctors ask today. Jesus asked, how long has he been experiencing this? How long has he had this seizure problem? When the blind man came to Jesus, Jesus asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted to see. Then Jesus spit in his hands and touched his eyes, right? And then he mixed mud with the spit, put it on the blind man's eyes, and once it dried, he peeled it off. And then Jesus asked him if he could see anything. I've got a friend who's a pastor. This is kind of a cool story. She went to visit a doctor, and she said that her doctor is just fabulous. She thought she had a heart problem, and he did too, so he prescribed an EKG. At the beginning of the EKG, he could see some irregularity in her heartbeat patterns. But by the end of the EKG, it was a normal sinus rhythm. So he sent her home and told her to come back in a couple of weeks to see if that was just a one-off experience. So she came back a couple of weeks later, and the doctor questioned her a lot of things about her normal medications, about her family history, about what she tends to eat and drink, about her exercise routines. And the doctor then asked her, do you have any stress in your life? Yeah, right. I think we all have stress. So the pastor said, well, of course I have stress. And the doctor asked, was your stress at home or at work? And the pastor said, well, mostly from work. And the doctor said, what? How can it be stressful just to take care of people's souls? I get that question too. Yep. A lot of people think that I just come up here on Sunday mornings. And they don't realize that I live up here on Sunday mornings. That I preach, and once I'm done. But like the pastor told the physician, I wish I could just take care of people's souls. But no, I've got board meetings, people are in the congregation are fussing and fighting with each other, the staff are fussing and fighting with each other, the church leaders fuss and fight with each other, I've got a slew of emails, I do pastoral counseling, hospital visits, nursing home visits, prison visits, weddings, funerals, classes, lectures, workshops, conferences, committees, all this stuff. Then the doctor said, oh, well. So the doctor asked her if she prayed. And she was kind of flummoxed that a doctor asked her if she prayed. She thought that was an odd question. So she said, yes, I pray every single day. And the doctor said, okay, you pray, but do you pray for a half hour with no distractions? And she said, well, no. I always have distractions. As soon as I begin to pray, there's a distraction that comes up, of course. I'm distracted 24/7. I never have 30 minutes of quiet prayer time. So the doctor responded and said, I always tell people that they need to meditate, to take the time to meditate and sit quietly. However, I'm going to tell you to pray because you're a pastor. So really, prayer and meditation should not be separated anyway because they're in parallel with each other. At least that's my view. I think you can meditate and pray at the same time. You don't have to separate the two. But anyway, the doctor said, I'm going to use the term prayer since you're a pastor. And the pastor thought, what? Are you giving me spiritual advice or medical advice? But this is what I want to tell all of you today. Your spiritual health and your physical health are not two separate entities at all. They are intertwined. That's why we often see the word holistic healing, which focuses on our physical, our mental, our emotional, and our spiritual healing, because everything is intertwined, everything is connected. That's how we were created. God was incredibly clever that everything about us works together. You can't just focus on your spiritual life and let your emotional and mental and physical life go. You can't just focus on your mental life without letting the others go. Everything is equally connected. And every religion in the world teaches balance. Balance is not just a Christian thing. Every religion in the world tries their best to preach and teach how to balance your life. So that female pastor said that her spiritual life was probably pretty good, but she didn't know how to sit quietly for 30 minutes. So the doctor said, sit for 30 minutes and pray. Meditate, whatever you want, but sit for 30 minutes and rest. Because at the beginning, her EKG had an abnormal pattern because of the questioning and all of her thoughts. I'm sure mine would look the same way. But by the end of the EKG, she had calmed and her heart pattern had come into normal sinus rhythm again. And she felt better. Isn't that cool? Because everything is connected. The spiritual part influences our physical health. Our physical part influences our spiritual health, our mental health, our emotional health. It's all connected. We can't compartmentalize. We can try, but we can't. We will not be successful. You know, in today's medicine, we think we can delay our lives. But you know, we think that we can just make a pill to keep our life going. We always look for new and better medicines. You know, we have bypass surgery now that can repair heart issues. We can replace hearts, we can replace lungs, we can replace hips, we can replace all kinds of portions of our body. And right, hips. We can replace hips, definitely. Yeah. We can replace knees. And all the doctors agree that a positive attitude makes a huge difference in today's medical success. All today's successful medical stories include a positive attitude. So my pastor friend, the doctor did give her some medicine to take every evening, and then also told her, I want you to pray a half hour every single day, alone with no distractions. Block your phone, turn off everything, lock yourself in your room, and pray for half an hour. The healing document in the gospel are very relational. They value relationship from God to people, God to Jesus, and Jesus to the masses. No one can be separated from that. We cannot be separated from relation and still be successful. Relation comes from the human to the divine, from the divine to the human. When Jesus met the paralyzed man who had been paralyzed for 38 years, Jesus asked the man, do you want to get well? Maybe we think that sounds like a silly question, right? He couldn't walk for 38 years, and Jesus is asking him if he wants to get well. Have you ever thought about that before? Didn't that really puzzle you? Why did Jesus ask that seemingly silly question? Well, of course this man wanted to get well and walk. You know, imagine in those days there were no walkers, no crutches, no wheelchairs, no canes, no auxiliary devices at all. There was no disability access whatsoever. And today we still don't have total access for people with disabilities, but back then there was absolutely none. So Jesus asked. And he asked because Jesus was inviting the man to answer for himself. Because that man was not a thing, that man was a person, a human being. And Jesus was inviting him, welcoming him to be a human, and to tell Jesus what he wanted. He was a human, he was a person, and Jesus was asking him, do you want to be in relationship with me? When the man cried out, when Jesus was on the road to Jericho, Jesus responded and said, what do you want me to do for you? That's an odd question, right? I mean, we would assume that a blind man would want to see, but Jesus asked, what do you want me to do for you? You know, and that's important, because most of us have a tendency to assume what other people want. I'm guilty, y'all are guilty. Everyone's guilty, period, right? That's something that we have to keep working on. Because that is will lead to spiritual growth, mental growth, social growth. We can't assume to know what another person wants or needs, especially if that individual is trying to manage a challenging disability. We well, you need this, or you need that, or you need the other thing. And you know, in the deaf community, we know that hearing people have decided things for us since we were born. People ask, what does the deaf community need? Well, what they need is to be heard. Ask us, what do black people need? You know, we white folks decide what black people need, right? Am I right? Men decide what women need. And that's been true since the beginning of time. But Jesus asked the individual, because Jesus is God, and Jesus was teaching that we are all created in God's image. We're all equal. Jesus didn't see the blind person and marginalize them and say, well, I don't have time for this guy. I've got to focus on all these Caucasian folks. Well, there weren't any Caucasian folks in that area of the world at that time. But anyway, Jesus didn't say, well, I just have to focus on those folks who are able-bodied. Instead, Jesus stopped, looked at the man, and said, what do you want me to do for you? Our history has a strong foundation of people in the upper echelons of society telling those in the lower levels of society what it is that we need. And we need to topple that. You know, think about it. I mean, as a woman, as a deaf woman, as having a disability, I will tell you what I need, but you need to ask me. I will help you all too, but I need to ask you what it is that you need. I'm not a fixer kind of person. I don't tend to jump in. I mean, I have learned to ask people what they need and then to level that power dynamic and come to an interchange. And that is what Jesus taught us. You all, as deaf people, have rights. As black people, have rights. As new immigrants, you have rights. And you have rights. You have the right to tell people what you need. You don't have to let them tell you what you need at all. That needs to stop. Some of our history is ugly. What if that blind man didn't really want to be sighted? I mean, we assume that the blind man wanted to see. Just like people assume that deaf people want to hear because they can't imagine that we couldn't hear birds or couldn't hear music. Some of us can hear music. Some of us are hard of hearing. Some of us can't. Some of us can hear birds, or maybe not birds, but, you know, right? So when we hear a story about a blind man, we just immediately assume that this poor guy is just flailing around in the dark. But what if this blind man just wanted to be in relationship with God and with Jesus the Messiah? Maybe he just wanted to interact. Because at that time, this blind man was ostracized. Because being blind meant, or at least the general society assumed, that someone had sinned. Because otherwise, this person would not have been born blind. So maybe this guy just wanted someone to talk with. And he knew from the chatter around him that Jesus was the Messiah, and that Jesus was his creator and would be willing to chat with him. Maybe he just wanted to tell a story to Jesus. Maybe he just wanted Jesus to hear him. What if he didn't want to gain his sight again? We won't know if we don't ask. So Jesus asked, what do you want me to do for you? And in that question, Jesus showed the man respect. He did not assume that he knew, and say, okay, I know you want to see, right? Of course, hold on just a minute. And then, grabbed up the dirt dirt, spit on it, and say, come on over, let's take care of this. Jesus didn't do that. Jesus focused on this man, let this man know that he saw him, he heard him, through that question, what do you want me to do for you? It was a way of recognizing this man's humanity, not just his disability. Right? He didn't think that this man was scandalous because he was blind. He just was a man who happened to be blind. So Jesus asked, what is it that you need me to do? And in that question, the relationship became equal. And Jesus said, I'm here to work with you. Jesus asked the same question to Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus is the one who cried out, Jesus, Son of David, show mercy on me. Now, Son of David was another name that meant Messiah. So Bartimaeus cried out in a loud voice because he wanted Jesus to know that Bartimaeus recognized Jesus as the Messiah. People around him tried to shush him up and tell him not to bother Jesus. Leave him alone. They tried to suppress him. They tried to oppress him. And we know what that's like. Right? They tried to make him shut up. But Jesus heard him anyway. And Jesus said, wait, tell him to come. So Bartimaeus came up to Jesus. He was rejoicing. And Jesus said, what is it you want me to do for you? Then Bartimaeus said, I want to see. And Jesus said, well, go. Your faith has healed you. Your sight has been restored. And their relationship changed into teacher and disciple. What do you want me to do for you appears often in the Bible. That was Jesus' most powerful and favorite question. It wasn't a holistic question. It was a relational question. It's a question that demonstrates respect and equity. So we have examples of the Messiah relating with individuals. The Messiah relating with people who had disabilities, which is great. Folks with disabilities in that time were considered outcasts. But Jesus showed that he would be in relationship with them, with lepers, with prostitutes, with women. I mean, for a women detention Jewish rabbi was just scandalous. But Jesus had a relationship with all the folks that society had determined needed to be ostracized and pushed out. And that's very empowering for us, right? The power of Jesus' story is empowering for us. God came down, humbled God's self, walked among us. Jesus could have said, I'll teach you what you can do for me. Because in the secular and the worldly realm, people like power. They like people to look at them. They like to be seated on the throne with the scepter. With the different regalia and insignias and the elaborate robes. They want the attention. People want to be on the front of People magazine, right? Think about it. When people die, sometimes there can be a funeral on TV for a week. But when we die, God notices. God's there for a week and for eternity, right? God does not tell us what we can do for God. God asks what God can do for us. God invites us to the front. Society pushes us to the back, and God beckons us to the front, over and over again. Remember, in our prayer, we pray that God's kingdom may come. And in God's kingdom, the most elevated position is that of servant. That's what Jesus said. And that's why Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you?" What do you want God to do for you? Go ahead. Ask God as many times as you want. You can ask 1,000 times for what it is that you want, and then wait for it. Receive. Know mentally and within your heart that you are worthy. That God has already asked you what God can do for you. So tell God, then wait and receive. God is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, asking, what can I do for you? Sit quietly, be silent, listen to what Jesus is asking you today. Jesus is saying, what do you want me to do for you?